All right, well, welcome everybody. Great to see so many folks here in the Sourcepass community again for this terrific session on getting started with Microsoft SharePoint. My name is Alan Bauman. I'm here with Jolynn Reen, who is just off camera here. We'll see if we can get her on the screen. There she is. Jolynn, if you're familiar with our sessions, you're very familiar with Jolynn. She knows all things Microsoft. We have yet to tap her knowledge out. We're waiting for her to run out of things that she knows, and so far we haven't hit it. So happy to have Jolynn here again today.
Thank you.
Yep, just a couple housekeeping items here before we get going, and then we're just going to dive right in. So, as you know, if you've been here before, these learning series webinars are really focused on helping you guys use the tools that you probably already have in a more effective and efficient way. As we all know, Microsoft is ever evolving, their Office platform, and so staying current is pretty helpful. And if you haven't really checked in with SharePoint for a while, this will be an interesting session for you. These are open to every Sourcepass client. We do these monthly. You register, as you probably did for this one, at sourcepass.com. And we also have a second webinar series, what we're calling our Digital Transformation Series, which has a focus on new technologies and best practices. So more about, less about the things that you already have and more about the things that you might want to consider implementing in the future. And AI is an example of that, a really current example of something that we might focus on in the Digital Transformation Series. But I also like to say that if you have friends, colleagues who aren't Sourcepass clients, feel free to invite them. Your friends are our friends. So, the more the merrier. If we can help some other folks that are friends of yours, we're happy to do that. So, you guys are all used to this at this point. Q&A button is how you ask questions. We have been very good about answering pretty much every question that we've had in these webinars. If we need to stay later, we will stay later. And then lastly here, we would love to get your feedback on the session today. We get a lot of feedback. It's really, really helpful to us. It helps us formulate plans for webinars going forward. So I believe a survey will go out over the next day or so. You'll have an opportunity to respond to that. So Jolynn, I want to just kind of talk a little bit before I launch into this with you. I just want to talk a little bit about SharePoint because from my perspective, been doing this for 35 years, so you and I have seen SharePoint for a long, long time. I don't know about long time, right? And I don't know about you, but I know that sometimes my experience with clients or folks that are trying to implement SharePoint is that it doesn't always go 100% as they would like it to go. And so we've seen over the years successful SharePoint implementations and then not so successful SharePoint implementations. Have you seen that too?
Oh, absolutely. I think people have a tendency when they get an application that's released, they kind of jump right into it and start using it without really kind of thinking and kind of stepping back and say, what is this application? Really, how should we be using it? How is it going to benefit our organization? But another thing with that, Alan, is we had classic SharePoint. Now we have modern SharePoint, which is a whole new ballgame. So different from what we started with as far as SharePoint is concerned.
Yeah. And, I think we see sort of themes like this with other platforms. I know in Teams, we saw, early on with the Teams explosion, there was what people call team sprawl because it was so easy for people to create a team and then pretty quickly nobody knew where anything was anymore. And so we're seeing some of this now even with AI. And so I guess the point is that the upfront planning, making sure SharePoint is the appropriate platform and then really understanding the use case, governance, all that really, behind the scenes, like before you start clicking the mouse kind of stuff, often has the most impact on the success of the platform.
Definitely. You want to think about roles with the application, having administrators, having people that are called champions, and then, of course, what do the end users need? And I got to say that sometimes SharePoint isn't going to be the answer. It is in a lot of cases, but, that's where Sourcepass can help everyone too to determine if it's a right fit for what their needs are. but I sure love it. I gotta tell you, it's one of the
Yep.
applications in Microsoft 365 suite that really integrates with everything else.
hmm Yeah, it really is kind of the heart and soul of it when you
It
dig right into
is.
it. Okay, so we'll talk a little bit more about how you might get help if you feel like you need that in terms of adoption and
Yes.
getting started in the right way. But at this point, Jolene, I'm going to kick it over to you and let you take
Sounds
it from here.
good. Okay. So what I wanted to really kind of start with here today is really talking about how do I get into SharePoint? Then we'll talk about the aspects of it, what can you do with it, those types of things. But one way to actually access SharePoint, depending on your role, depending on your permission levels, is to simply go to your Microsoft account. So I'm logged into my Microsoft account. I can go to my apps launcher. Then I can simply click SharePoint. And what this is going to do is, of course, it's your SharePoint sites that you have rights to use. So it's not going to show you every SharePoint site within your organization. Unless you are an administrator, you would go through the administrator side of things. But this is going to show you everything that you're actively working with. So this would be one way to access it. This isn't always how I do it, to be honest, because I could have, and I have quite a few different SharePoint sites out here, but if I want to go to a specific SharePoint site on a regular basis, you want to make it easy for the end users to get to. I can access it through Microsoft Teams. Technically, I could have a shortcut on my desktop. Now, I access it by doing my favorites bar. So I'm in my internet browser. I have my favorites bar at the top, and I can have a SharePoint site like this one here called Clinic, and it says Home. That could be a shortcut that you quickly and easily can get into a SharePoint site. So the way that I'm showing you right now is probably not the most common. But what's nice about this way is you can access everything. So if it's not a site that you've been using regularly, but you want to go to it, this would be an option for you to do so. So I'm actually going to open up a SharePoint site called Our Intranet. That's a name that I personally gave the site when I created it. So, and when Alan and I were talking about the planning side of things, normally in an organization, we don't want everyone to create a SharePoint site. We want to limit who has the rights to do that because of what really can happen in the background. And we wanted to have the correct permission levels and things like that. So I opened up this one called Our Intranet. It is just a test site that I have. It's not really my personal company SharePoint site, but I wanted to use this to give you an idea of what happens in most organizations. So what is SharePoint? Once you come into a SharePoint site, what exactly is it? The word site helps you to know that it's internet based. So all we need is an internet connection to access a SharePoint site, and you need permissions to that site. So most companies have a website, and it's similar to a website in the way that we develop it, the way that we create it. But what's very different is going to be the permission side. By default, we're talking about usually just having our organization, people within our domain, having access to an intranet site. This is like an internal website just for the employees of your company. Could you have vendors and different customers and stuff have access to a SharePoint site? Absolutely. But this particular site that I'm going to be showing you here today is just for coworkers within my company, just to kind of keep that in the back of your mind. But when you actually look at this, it is an internet browser web address. So just like you go to a website, your company website or somebody else's website, it's the same concept that you would see on going to a URL. So you can see up at the top, it's got this URL to it. So that's what's being saved as a shortcut for people to get back to it. So it could be in different places and different areas, depending on how someone wants to physically access it. But let me walk you through what you can do with a SharePoint site. So this happens to be what is called a communication SharePoint site. Usually on an intranet level, we have a home page that everybody can go to within the SharePoint site. So in this case, everybody in the company has rights to get to this site. This is called a hub. So it's kind of if you think of it as a hierarchy, this is going to be the top level. We can then branch off and have a different SharePoint site for each department within our organization. So if I need something from HR, I could go to the HR site. If I need something from marketing, I could go there, etc. We just go to the department or wherever we need to go to get specific information. But what do we go to a SharePoint site for? What's the purpose of it? What are the benefits of it? I could spend all day just talking about the benefits of it, but the main components really of a SharePoint site is to communicate. So this is a communication site, meaning I want to communicate specific information with my organization. I could have company news out there. We could talk about promotions, retirements. We could have all kinds of detail as to what's going on within the company. We don't have to worry about once a week I'm going to get an email newsletter that tells me this information. It can be instant. I can come here anytime to see everything that's going on. We could have access to any job openings in case we want to, further our career along within our company, those types of things. Anything and everything that your organization needs to share, hence the name SharePoint, we can put it out in SharePoint. But SharePoint is part of your Microsoft 365. Therefore, it works directly with all of those other applications. So it's going to work with Outlook. It works with Teams, very much so, and I'll show you that in a minute. It also works with Forms. It works with Power BI. It works with our Power Apps, so we can create workflows to have it do things. It's Microsoft Lists. Everything is together. This to me is like the hub of connecting with all of our other 365 apps. That's why you want to plan things out before they get built to really know when somebody comes to this site, what do they need to see? What do they need to have access for other apps? When they go to a different department, what do they need to have access to? So the backbone of how the SharePoint site is actually developed, how it's created, is like building a website. I've been building websites for ever almost since the internet has been out, and SharePoint is built that same way. And I got to tell you, by the end of the year, there's even going to be additional tools that are being released as we speak to help us even build them easier with Copilot. But just to give you an idea, what you're seeing on my screen right now is I have navigation for the whole entire site, the hub, going across the top, our intranet. I have these links. Then I have these links that are specific to the site that I'm actively on. So we have this hub at the top, and then on this hub is going to be quick, easy access to what an employee might need to see. These are called a hero. These images that you're seeing, it's technically a hero in the background of SharePoint. We could do a whole nother class to learn about those types of things, but basically I could have links on any of these images to take us to other places, just like a website. So we have hyperlinks to take us wherever we want to go. I had this one physically taking me to another website. So it can be a physical link that takes us wherever we want to have it go, to another page within a site, to another whole site, to our company website, wherever we want it to go. But then I could have some information about our company news. I could have events that are coming up, a calendar on this SharePoint site that shows we're going to be offering these trainings. We're going to have a blood drive on this day. We could have all of that information all available within the SharePoint site, so our employees have one place to go to access everything that they need. Right now, of course, everybody's updating their insurance with the organization and doing all of those kind of things. All of that could be things that are on your intranet that every employee will know I go here to access it. but a very big component of SharePoint is documents. So I even have access right here to get to a document library if we design it that way. I don't always do that on the home page of the intranet, but just to kind of scroll up and down and show you what could be here. I'm actually going to go to another site that is connected to my hub, and it's actually called the Clinic Department. It doesn't necessarily have to be, of course, medical related. It could be any type of a department within your organization. But just to give you an idea, on the left-hand side is now my navigation. Last site I was on, which was our homepage of the intranet, had the navigation across the top. And I mentioned that that was a communication site where we want to provide communication to our employees. This clinic site happens to be connected, so people have access to it, but we could actually limit who of our employees have access to this site. And that's where we want to make sure that we're involving, IT, whoever the admin of SharePoint is. We don't want to just have people out there making these SharePoint sites. We want to do the planning and make sure everything is being done appropriately. But this is a team site. Yes, Microsoft Teams. Built right into SharePoint. So when we create a SharePoint site, we decide, do we want it to be a communication site or a team site? A team site is going to come with a link directly to Microsoft Teams, which I'll show you in just a moment. But it also is going to come with other things. Both a communication site and a team site will come by default with at least one document library for document storage. But we can always add as many as we need and do different things with it. But just to give you an idea, Alan, did we have someone with a question first?
Sure, yeah.
Yes.
So the question is from Eric, what are the benefits of the templates that Microsoft has?
Oh my gosh, I'm so glad you brought that up. um, Whole nother class we can do those and work with the templates and show you how to actually do the web parts and everything. I'll show you a little bit on editing, but oh my goodness. Built into Microsoft are templates that we can actually use to create our SharePoint sites. So we don't have to start from scratch. We can start with really, if I said that this was going to be a project management site, it would give you tools that are directly related to managing a project. So it's going to give you components, pages, etc., that are going to automatically be included. If you think about templates, we have templates in Microsoft Word, we have templates in Excel, PowerPoint, etc. So SharePoint also provides these templates so we don't have to start from scratch. It's going to give you web parts that will already be on the home page and other pages within the site. We just have to go in and modify for our own use. It's going to give you text placeholders, image placeholders, etc. If you can start with a template, highly recommend it, by the way. Alan, again, did you have a question?
Yep, just a follow up from
Yeah.
Eric. So the question is, does
Yes.
Sourcepass offer custom SharePoint template creation? And Eric, we can definitely check in with you offline, or you can, check in with us. But yes, we should be able to help you with that. And I'll mention this at the end of the call, but if you know who your CSM is, you can reach out to them. If you don't, at the end of the call here, we're going to give you a generic email address that you can reach out to us, and we'll route it to the right person. But yes, we can help you with that.
And another side note on that, just so everybody knows too, we can create a custom template and save it so that it can be reused for every time that we're creating a new site or a new page, so that it has specific content to it, like logos and things like that. So those can be done as well. We want to kind of ease the process of creating them. And I have to tell you that Copilot is going to be your best friend now also. So by the end of the year, when all these great new features are released to everybody, there's going to be some wonderful new things coming to SharePoint as well. But anyway, kind of back to this is a team SharePoint site. So we could choose the type of SharePoint site we create. This particular team site comes with multiple things that we don't get in a communication site. Navigation on the left-hand side, navigation across the top if it's communication, but it's going to automatically come with a OneNote notebook. It's going to come with a connectivity to go directly to Microsoft Teams. It's going to come by default with a task list, which is Microsoft Planner. It's also it's also going to come with at least one document library. We can always add. We get lists that can be added in. So there's all these other 365 apps that we can use to directly be connecting through SharePoint. I don't have to leave SharePoint. This is the big part about it. I don't have to leave SharePoint to use these other apps. They are here. They're a part of it. So let me show you what I mean by that. So first, just briefly, I want to show you, this is the site that I'm on. I've got one image here. Just so you can see, I'm going to scroll down a little bit so you can see a couple of other content. You know, I could have news, I can have locations, you know, different clinic locations. I can have quick links to get to specific things, but how do these all get here? Just to show you, if you have rights to modify the SharePoint site, at the top right, you can click edit. When you are in edit mode, so to say, we're in the background of developing the actual site. That's why we don't want just anybody coming out here doing this, because we want to make sure that they understand certain elements and they understand what not to remove and what to add. But you can see that it's set up in what are called sections. So we put web parts in these sections to give these components to the end users that are using the actual sites. So on the right hand side, you can see I have a list of some of the web parts, but I could go to a new, add in a new section. I could change out the image, have the image be a hyperlink to go to wherever I wanted to go. And as you can see, I can keep adding and adding to this. So these are kind of the background of where we build it, which has changed over the past few years. So if you're somebody that was using an older version of SharePoint and it wasn't very easy to create sites back then, you really had to, at the very beginning, you had to be a programmer. Now it's more user friendly on how we create and move things around, which is great. But a lot of times we have the champion role of a person that's going to be doing all of this part. They design it and they can put things together. So depending on your organization, how you're going to have your stakeholders that are involved with your project. But anyway, just so you could see what the background looks like. When I'm done, I would actually republish it, which makes it go live for everyone to use. So just like we do with a regular website, I go out and I change my website, I republish it so that it's live for anybody in the world to go to. SharePoint, of course, is not available to everybody in the world by default. But on the left-hand side, just so you can see, I do have a documents where it says the word documents. That is my default document library, which of course is where we save our files. So if you're an organization that is still in a network drive situation and you're considering migrating over to SharePoint, that's where Sourcepass is going to help you with that, because they can help have your files go to the correct document library. The document libraries can be named just like we, did things back in the network drive, but there's some special ways that we want to really be organizing our files and our folders, our document libraries and our other content based on permission levels and what do people really need access to in specific places, just so you're aware of that. But in a document library, we can bring files over from another location, or we can actually add new ones from here. Alan, did you have a question?
Yeah, so Alan, also named Alan, has a question here, and he says, I like the idea of using Teams for libraries. How would
Yes.
collaboration outside of assigned departments work on the file sharing setting?
So could you say that one more time? So he
Yep,
likes the Teams.
yep, I like the idea of using Teams for libraries. How would
Okay.
collaboration outside of assigned departments work? And then it says on the file sharing setting.
Okay. So let me see if I'm getting that correctly. So if I'm here in Microsoft Teams, just so you know, I have access to all of my SharePoint files. I can have a link from SharePoint to my OneDrive. I can also go directly into Microsoft Teams. So when we talk about file management, which I think we've done a session on SharePoint, Teams and OneDrive on the file management. If not, Ellen, we should maybe put that in again, because what's going to happen is if I go to an actual team in Teams and I go to the a specific channel, like if I go to the accounting department, I go to the accounts payable channel in my team, the Files tab is SharePoint. Every time a team is created, and this is kind of the issue that we ran into when Teams was first released, people didn't realize that we were actually creating a SharePoint site. So this accounting department team was not created through SharePoint. It was created through Teams, but it is a SharePoint site. And this is a document library. So when I'm looking at my files and my folders, whoever has rights to this team, to this channel, has rights to these documents, all of these files. So they should be directly related to the name of the document library. But just so you can see, my menu at the top has this open in SharePoint. If I click open in SharePoint, this is going to take me directly to the SharePoint site that is connected to that team. But it was created through Teams, not through SharePoint. So it's not necessarily a part of my intranet. It's only the team that has access to it. It's not technically a part of any other SharePoint site. But when I come in here, I'm in my document library and I have full access to everything SharePoint document libraries have access. So what I mean by that is if I right click on a file to go into the menu, in SharePoint, you get the most capabilities of what it is that you can do with this file. Not back in Teams. If I'm back in Teams, I'm not going to get exactly the same choices. So back in Teams, if I right click that same file, I'm going to see some of the same features, but not everything. So I'm not going to be able to do alerts. I'm not going to be able to actually do a workflow that will send this file for review to people. That's not built in here to Teams as of today. I have to go through SharePoint to do that, but I could just by opening this document library in SharePoint. So it really, that's where the planning side of this, Alan, is so important for people to understand is, should we be accessing our files through Teams? Should it be a SharePoint site that is connected to other SharePoint sites that we can be accessing our files from? So it's kind of, we really need to dig deeper to find what we really need. But to throw one more thing into this, when I go to Teams, when I'm looking at my Teams, notice this one called Clinic. This, I'm going to go to the general channel of this clinic. This is my SharePoint site that I was just in. So notice the logo for this clinic site is exactly the same as when I'm back here in my clinic site. Come on, sorry. There it is. There's that same logo. Because when this was created through SharePoint, I said I wanted it to be a team site. Therefore, it automatically created the team in Microsoft Teams. The document libraries can be available through Teams or by coming here through SharePoint. I can access them either place, but I can do the same thing with that accounting department, just so you know. So they're both SharePoint. These are systems, so SharePoint and Teams are the front end to accessing all these other apps, like Planner. So if I go to the left-hand side here from the SharePoint site, I have this task list. I have this by default. I didn't have to add it in. It automatically was included so that everybody in this clinic department has access to a shared task list called Microsoft Planner, which has not technically been updated yet to the newest version of Planner. It will be shortly, but just so you know. Also, I have this policy list. If I go to this policy list, this is something that I added to this SharePoint site. What this actually is a Microsoft list. an actual Microsoft list. Whole nother application, but it's directly available here through SharePoint, which I can also do through Microsoft Teams. I could have access to a list, just so you're aware. But let me go back to Teams for just a second, because when we were just in Teams, get back into, oops, sorry, share that on my screen. So when I come back into Teams, just so you're aware, I'm going to go back to accounting. Well, actually, sorry, I'm going to be in this clinic site, but I'm going to go to this vaccinations. And here up at the top is this tab called Legal Docs. When I click Legal Docs, this takes me directly to, because it was a link, to go directly to the clinic SharePoint site. And it took me directly to this document library called Legal Documents. The best part about this is we can have separate permissions. So let's say that I have 10 people that have access to this clinic SharePoint site, but only 3 of them need to see the legal department's document library. We can set up special permissions just for those people to see it on their navigation. If they don't have rights to it, they're not going to see it. Think about that when you're in Teams. In Microsoft Teams, if you create a private channel, only the members of that channel will see it. We can do the same things in SharePoint. It really started in SharePoint, and of course we put it over, not we, but Microsoft put it over to Teams as well. So we have a lot of those same capabilities, but the permission levels and the maintenance and everything is highest. We have the most capabilities directly in SharePoint. SharePoint is a extremely powerful program. It can do a lot. It can, because of the backbone of it, of being a website development program, it can be connected to an ERP system. It can be connected to an ODBC connection. We can have whatever it is that we need can physically be connected to a SharePoint site. So kind of having a hierarchy of a SharePoint hub and then the subsites, and then giving the correct permission levels to the people that really need access to specific areas is very, very important, because we don't want everybody to be able to get to these legal documents. Only the people that need them should have rights to them. We wouldn't put them on the home page of the intranet so that everybody in the company can see them. So SharePoint gives us that capability of having easy to access and easy to find information by using links. Just like your website does, we use the links. Now, back to this left-hand side here in this clinic site, I have lots of different additional things that it includes, which is a notebook. So this is a shared notebook we get by default because this is a team SharePoint site. So just so you can see, it's automatically opening that link to that notebook. So everybody that has rights to this clinic site has rights to that notebook. So when the site is created, we need to know which things do we want to keep? Do they need access to these? Do they need access to other things? If you have edit capabilities, you could go to the menu at the top and click Add New Item. Oh, I'm sorry. Let me go back to the home page. I didn't mean to be on the list. I thought I was on the home page. On the home page of the site, I can go to New, and New would allow me to add in a new shared list, a new document library. I could be adding in a new page. And if you think about a page like a web page, if you go into your website and then you have your products and services that you provide, somebody clicks on a link to go to it, they're going to another page. We can have multiple pages related in our SharePoint site. So kind of that hierarchy I was talking about, we have our intranet hub at the top. We can have separate sites for each of our departments, and inside each of those departments could be another site, and or each site could have multiple pages to it, all depending on how they need to be organized and the permission levels that we want to grant the people going into it. Because I could come into clinic and maybe everybody in my organization has rights to get into the clinic or into the HR page, or the HR site, I should say. But on the home page, they're going to see things like job openings, this person's information, this person is joining us. They're going to see, how do I update my W-2s? What are our upcoming 2025 holidays we're going to be closed? They can see that general information. But if I'm an employee of HR, I might see another link that would take me into the actual employees of that department, where we have things that only we can access. So when we start to think about how powerful that can be, that's why we need to be doing some planning before we build. But I do want to talk about the main component of what people use SharePoint for is document libraries. So kind of back to the topic of those document libraries. I'm going to go to the one called legal documents. I had mentioned that I had a shortcut to that in my team right in Microsoft Teams. But what if I'm in OneDrive? What if I'm in my File Explorer and I need to access a file from this legal documents? If you look at the menu going across the top, there's this icon called Pin to Quick Access. This is going to give me, and I'll show you where this is located at. It's going to be pinned on the left-hand side of the navigation when I go to places like OneDrive, the OneDrive app itself. But if I choose Add Shortcut to OneDrive, then I'm going to have the actual entire document library available through OneDrive and File Explorer. Let me show you it. So I have it already added. So if I click Add Shortcut to OneDrive, it's going to tell me that it's already been added. So how I access it is, one way, of course, is I could go to Microsoft Teams, which I live and breathe in Teams, so I'll show you through Teams. If I'm in Teams and I go to OneDrive on the left-hand side, I'm going to have access to, here's my quick access down here. So here's my clinic legal departments, or legal documents I meant. Or if I go to my files, this is going to show me, of course, every folder I have. And in Teams and SharePoint, because they're all considered a document library, we can have these shortcuts to these. So if I scroll down here, here's my legal documents. You can see that it has this folder with the two people. If I click legal documents, it's going to show me all of my folders and my files just as if I were in SharePoint. I can do exactly that same thing through File Explorer. So if I'm in File Explorer, let me bring that over here. Oops, let me maximize that screen here for you. And if I'm in my OneDrive through File Explorer, I can scroll down and show you right here is my legal documents. So we have access to these document libraries from multiple places. Because one of the things that people would tell me all the time is, if I go to SharePoint, then I have to click here and I have to click here to get to something. Technically, you don't. You can have these now. This isn't something that we've had forever. This is a more recent feature that Microsoft has added in. So if you were a past user and were a little disappointed, things have definitely changed in SharePoint. I highly recommend you giving it another try. But we won't get the same features. I can open a file. So if I'm here in File Explorer, I'm going to open up this Excel dashboards file just to show you. If I open it, it's going to, by default, open it in my desktop version of Excel, just so you know that it does that. So let me show it to you on your screen here. So just so you could see that it opened it in my desktop version. If I open it directly through SharePoint or through Microsoft Teams, by default, And here's that same exact file. I'm going to click to open it here through the SharePoint document library. It's going to automatically open it in the online version of Excel, but of course that can change. We can always have it be in the desktop if we need to or whatever. But just so you could see, I can access the same file. And because things are in a SharePoint document library, whether it's through Teams or here, or if it's in a cloud, your OneDrive, we do have access to the, and let me kind of show you this. I'm going to change this to say Western sales. It does keep track, and I'm going to change this updated. It does keep track of version history. So because it's cloud-based, we of course don't have that when we're in network drives. So I'm just going to go ahead and close this file just so you can, oops, I got to move that over a little bit. Sorry. So just so you could see, I can go back to my document library. I could have opened it from here. I could open it through OneDrive. I can open it through File Explorer. I can open it through Microsoft Teams. We have a lot of different ways we can get to things. Plus, remember when I said that you can have those shortcuts in your internet browser? It can actually be a shortcut directly to this document library because it's whatever your web address is. When you save that bookmark or that shortcut, that's where it's going to take you. So kind of think about those kind of things on making things, accessing things real, quick and easy for your end users. We want to make it easy for everybody to get to. But here in SharePoint, like I said, it is a very powerful program and we have access to all kinds of features when it comes to working with files. If you right click on a file, just so you can see, through Teams, I'm not going to have access to everything. One of the features is this automate, where we can request sign off. So when we talk about SharePoint working with other applications, if I do this request sign off, I can choose who I want to email and let them know that I want them to review this file and then approve or reject it. So on the right hand side, it will open up it's just so you know, it's using SharePoint. It's using an approval app built in 365. It's using Microsoft Teams and it's using Outlook right now. It's using all those apps, but we're initiating things directly from SharePoint. That's where this power of this program comes in. But it doesn't have to be super difficult for us to use it. Things have gotten much easier. So I'm going to say that I want to approve this, and I would add in a note, please review, blah, blah, blah. I would put in an email note. I'm going to click run flow. It automatically is sending me an Outlook email and it's notifying me in Microsoft Teams. So it has a built-in notification. Unfortunately, I can't use that through Microsoft Teams document library. I do have to open SharePoint to be able to use that feature. But we can have that, like I said, it's connected to Power BI. We could be using our Power Apps and doing all kinds of automation, whether it's SharePoint or it's here through it's SharePoint or Teams. We could be doing it either way. But just so you know, if I go back to Microsoft Teams right now, I got a notification in my activity. If I go to my activity, you can see that Jolynn sent an approval request and it's going to keep track of it. It gives me a link to the file and I can approve or reject it directly here through Teams. Or I could do it through an email that I got in Outlook as well, just so you can see how that workflow goes. And it keeps track of it, the approval process, directly through my SharePoint document library. So you can see right here, it knows that it's pending. I haven't had it approved or rejected yet. It's actually, I'm waiting. So it's in a pending status, which is pretty cool that it keeps track of all of that. But other things that I want you to be aware of, a lot of people have some worries about using a SharePoint document library, because what if somebody deletes something or adds something and they shouldn't be, and all of those kind of things? We can set up what are called alerts, where let's say that I'm the person responsible for this legal documents library. I could set up an alert by going to this menu at the top. I'm going to click Alert Main. We would give the alert a name, etc. It's going to automatically email me. And I could choose what changes. So if something happens in this entire document library, I can get an email notification letting me know that things were changed. If something new was added, an existing item was modified, an item was deleted, somebody else changed a document, I can make any choices that I need to and then click OK. And I would get notified via Outlook email when these things happen. So we can do it on an individual file or an entire document library. So when we talk about the strength of this program called SharePoint and working with these document libraries, this takes us way beyond what we ever could have done in a network drive situation. This is not only for the past files, it's for our current files, and it's for our future files to be able to really communicate and collaborate with our coworkers. When a file, of course, is saved within a cloud, it can be shared with others. So whoever has rights to this document library, we can do live collaboration, meaning we can have multiple people in one file at the same time. Of course, we can have different levels of permission for that as well. So you don't have to worry about accidents happening and things like that. I can even check a file out to lock it so that people can't go in it while I make changes to it. So if I need to change some things in a hidden sheet and things like that, I can check the file out. When I'm done, check it back in so that everybody will have access to it. So it's amazing what we can do in SharePoint. But SharePoint is more than the document libraries, but that's a very common option to use. As I said, we can have shared notebooks, not only in a Teams SharePoint site, but I could even do that back on my intranet. If I wanted to have a shared notebook for everybody to access through a clinic site, we could do that as well. There are multiple options that we would have available, which is good. And I'm going to go to this one. I think it was under this vacation requests. We could have any kind of link up at the top that would take someone to another place. I think I set this one up. I'm waiting for it to open here, but if it doesn't open in a second, that's okay. I'll just go someplace else. But let me open up this company orders, just so you could see what the links we could have, whether it's on the left-hand side or going across the top. This happens to be a list. This was put into a list, and I can have a shortcut for everybody right across the top. We configure the navigation, just like with a website, SharePoint, we configure the navigation on how we want people to access things. But I'm going to jump back to the home page of our intranet again, because if I wanted everybody to have access to that right away at the top of this window, I could add a web part called a quick link. I don't know if I have a quick link to demonstrate on this one. I did back in that clinic department, where we could have a side menu like a website does, where we could have quick links to get into whatever it is that they need to have access to. Oh, by the way, here's a form. So let's say that we're doing a survey. We want to, kind of ask our employees about a specific thing. I used to work for a convenience store chain in the Midwest, and they came out with this hot foods program, and we were always surveying our employees. Well, that was back before we had any of these capabilities. We were having people do it on paper, and we'd have to scan it in with our Scantron and do all of that. Microsoft 365 has an app called Forms. I have this form built into my SharePoint site. So, and when I'm done, I can remove it. So I could have this on my homepage of my intranet. People will come out and they'll see what the questions are. They'll write in their answers. They'll click the option that they want, whatever the questions are on the form. We click submit, and who's ever maintaining that form can collect the results, and they could even have it in a database or in Excel or wherever they need to use it to analyze the information. So that can even be included on a SharePoint site. So when we stop and think about everything that a SharePoint site can do, We can have document libraries, we can have lists, we can have shared notebooks, we can have shared task lists, not just regular lists, but shared task lists. We can have forms that are out here. We can have it be a direct link to our company website, whatever it is that we need. Extremely powerful. Okay, so let me jump back up to the top of this. And the other things that I wanted to mention when it comes to really kind of thinking about working with SharePoint and, really what are going to be the benefits of why you would use SharePoint. SharePoint can also have calendars. The calendars can be connected to Outlook as well, because we can create, and this is kind of a little bit off the main topic here, but we can have a calendar that is part of a group, where we can have a group email, a group calendar, etc., that everybody that is an owner, member, and a guest can have access to this information. And we can have all of our upcoming events be on this calendar. So there's all, and let me kind of add one to this, just so you can kind of see what I'm doing, what I mean by all of that. I'm going to click edit, and I'm going to say that I want to add in. Sorry. Take me just a second for this to open up, but I'm going to go to the web parts, and this will give you a better idea as to the components that can be added into a SharePoint site. So right up here at the top, I have this hero. I'm actually going to select this object and delete it. So I don't want that web part to be up there. Instead, I'm going to go to this plus sign at the top of this. I'm going to click on that plus sign, and it's going to give me a list of my web parts that I can be adding in. I could add in a form, I could add in a group calendar, I could add in a banner, an image, quick links. Just so you're kind of seeing some of these options, I could add in a link to a document library, I could add in files, I could have a video, which I have one page that has a site that has a video. I could add in a planner, an org chart, news, company news, that kind of thing. But it's got all these different categories. I could add in weather, I could add in maps. So this is a list of all the different web components that we have available. Alan, did someone have a question?
We actually have quite a bunch of them here,
Okay,
Jolynn. So I was really
so
going to
I'll
save
just
them to
add
the
this and
end.
show you.
So yeah, so when you're
Okay.
ready to wrap up, we'll get to them.
Yeah, so I'll just finish this up and then we can start with all of those. Okay. So basically all I did was added in the web component for a group calendar, and I can change the name of it. So right now, let's say that this is going to be for our clinic, department, events. Oops, I can't spell. But we would be able to then come in and create meetings that everybody would be able to see. We can even add countdowns. So like if we're going to do a blood drive, I could add a web part for a countdown that can count down to the second as to when something is going to happen, and I can give them a link to automatically register for it, or whatever the case might be. Sky's the limit. That's why we plan. That's why we really want to think ahead before we just start building and asking people to join it. We don't want to have a bunch of members until we actually have some of it built. But I'm just going to click republish so that everybody can see this, and then we'll go ahead and jump into those questions, Alan. Okay, so once this republishes, it will display this at the top, and everybody, of course, that comes in, that's the first thing that they'd see. I probably wouldn't put it right there, but just so you can see that they would have access to that. So Alan, what were the questions that we had?
Yeah, there's quite a
Get this.
few here, Jolynn. So let's just chip
Okay.
away at them here. So Jeremy asks, what happens when multiple people are editing the same page?
Oh, are you talking about a SharePoint page?
That's all it says, but I would assume
Yeah,
so.
I'm going to assume so as well. It's really kind of I hate to say it, but it's the last save, because if I'm on the same page as somebody else and I go in and make a change to the same object that they're making, whoever saves last, their changes are going to be saved. So usually you don't have multiple people. And that's where the champion side of this comes into play. We usually talk with our team members that are going to be working on these, and we know who's going to be going in and editing which pages, so we can eliminate that. Okay.
Yep. Okay, so here's the next one. And this one is from Kimberly. So she asks, she says, I created a site for our supervisors and added the notes in a notebook to the top via the hero. When I try to open it, clicking on the box doesn't open the notebook, but rather tries to download the notebook instead. And I receive an error message. Should I be linking the notebook in a different way? Or is that the correct, or is that the incorrect way to use the section? And folks should just click the notebook on the side panel.
It probably would be easier to just use either the side navigation or the top navigation that you have available for that notebook. It could even be a button. Usually a hero is not going to be something that will take you into a notebook, but yes, it could. So it sounds like it wasn't set up correctly because it needs to be the web address of where that notebook is physically residing that they are linking to. So there's probably something behind the scenes that is causing that issue because normally it should automatically open, but it's going to open in its own tab. Okay.
Okay, so next question, another one from Alan. So
Okay.
what he says is provisioning access to users. It seems duplicative to manage that in Teams with membership/private and in SharePoint, parens library access sites. What should be on top primary, SharePoint or Teams or both?
Well, when it comes to the permission levels are a lot stronger in SharePoint. So it depends on what permission levels, and that's where that planning comes in. So if I say, okay, I'm going to have a SharePoint site, and on this site, I'm going to have this document library. I need to document, as I'm planning, I put together, here's a list of the people that needs rights to this document library. This person is going to be read-only. This person can have full capabilities to it, etc. Because we have that full capability of doing all those permissions in SharePoint. In Microsoft Teams, yes, you can have that private channel and have a document library where only the members, owners, members, or guests of that private can have access to it, but they have to be a member of the team first. They can't just be a member of that private channel, if that helps. And the permission levels are not that good.
All right, and one follow-up question from Alan. What's the difference between syncing and add shortcut to OneDrive?
Good question. So the add shortcut gives you that physical folder that is located in OneDrive, whether I'm on the app or I'm through File Explorer. When I'm in File Explorer, let me come back to this legal documents here, and let me just jump back up to my actual document library. I'm sorry, my OneDrive. When I'm here in my OneDrive, we have this column called status. What I can do is, let's say that I know I'm not going to have access to the internet tonight and I need to be working on these files in this JR miscellaneous. I can right click on this folder and I can actually tell the computer to always keep on this device. What that's going to do is sync these files to my local drive so that I can work with them when I don't have an internet connection. Then when I do reconnect to an internet, it's going to sync those files back up to my OneDrive. And then I need to come back and uncheck always keep on this device, because if I try doing too many things, I'm going to end up crashing. You'd never want to take your whole OneDrive and say always keep on this device. You're going to end up crashing. That's too much on your system. Your resources won't keep up with it. So syncing is related to having it synced to your local. The shortcut is a great tool to use because then you don't have to worry about going to SharePoint, finding the document library. You have it right when you need it. Okay, hope that helped.
All right, moving on here. Rachel asks, and I think we had a similar question. Is there capability to create a SharePoint site template that can be duplicated and then customized as needed?
Yes, 100% yes.
Yep. Moving on to Robin. Can you set up a SharePoint site that external people can access so that you can share info with partners?
Yes, absolutely. I could have a subsite to my site. So let's say that I'm in the clinic department, but I have a group of people outside of my network, my domain, that I want to have access to something, whether it's clients or vendors or whatever the case might be. That's what SharePoint does. That's where that power of SharePoint comes into play, that we can have it set up so only specific people have rights to that. So if somebody has rights to that site, they're still not going to be able to get back to my intranet or anything else. Only the site that we give them access to, or the page we give them access to. Good question.
Okay, Michael mentions that he missed part of the webinar, wondering if it will be available to listen to later. And Michael, the answer is yes. We actually have built a video library of all of the sessions that we've done. It's on the Sourcepass website. And you can navigate, not only watch this one, but really any of the ones that we've done to date.
Yes.
All right, and Nicholas writes, if there is an employee that is now brought into work on a project and needs access to a document library or set of files, can they send a request for said permission? Or is
Technically,
it,
yes, they could.
okay, so the second part of this question is, or is it that if the permission doesn't exist for that employee, they won't be able to see it in any of the libraries?
They wouldn't be able to see it in any of the libraries, but they can ask for permission for that because that only takes a couple of seconds to do.
Okay. Next question, Vaughn states, my company uses SharePoint as a document library. If a file directory name is too long, I get an error message because the website link can't be that long. My
Yes.
question is, if I make these websites for my company, does it add to the file name length?
So when you saw when I went in, so let me show you here. So let me go back to this legal documents here. When you're in the actual, so when I go to this legal documents, notice the web address is up here. This is just to the actual document library itself. If I go to a specific file within that document library, you're going to see all of this. This is the full address. This is not what the file itself will be, but this would be the full address that if you shared it as a link, this is what the link in the background would look like. But it's truncated. It's not all of that when it's your actual physical file, just so you know. So it shouldn't have an issue. But let me back up on that, because now, and this is where the planning side of everything comes into play, because before we migrate your files through this migration tool in Microsoft and bring them over to a document library, not only do we need to have the files cleaned up, but we need to make sure that the file names are not exceeding limits. So sometimes we need to truncate them, and we need to make sure that they're the correct file types before they get brought over. Lots of planning. Okay.
We have a couple questions here in the chat, Jolynn. I think one of these might have been asked already, but first one is, if you make a change in either opening, SharePoint Drive, etc., will it update them all?
So if I open up a file that is stored in my SharePoint site, but I open it through File Explorer, through my shortcut there, if I make changes to it, it doesn't matter if I did it in the desktop, doesn't matter if I did it online, doesn't matter if I did it on my phone, it always syncs back to its original location. So I hope that answered that question.
All right, and then last question. So I know we answered the question that this is possible, but the question here is, how does a person safely and securely share documents with other people outside of your organization?
Do you want to share just specific documents or files? If that's the case, they can do single files. So like if I'm in my document library and I just have one file that I want to share with somebody that's outside of this, they're not part of my company. If I share it, nobody else is going to, that person that I share it with only has rights to that one file. You can simply go to the file, go to your share icon, or right click and go to share. And then you can choose who you want to share it with and what their permissions will be. Make sure you click on the pencil so you can choose, can they edit? They can't download the file and save it to their computer. You know, what do you want it to be? You can just copy a link and give it to them as well, but otherwise you could put in, like if I wanted to share this file with Alan, I could put in Alan and then I would type in the message that I want to send and then click send. It gives them an email. Okay. So it can go to any vendor or customer or whatever you need. But they can't get to anything else in this document library. Just that file.
Good questions, guys. That was great.
That was great.
Yep. Good stuff.
Good thought process. Okay. Love it.
Yeah, I think that wraps the questions. So Kat, if you want to, or whoever, yep. Okay, so we want to just kind of wrap up our session here today real quickly, because I know we're running over a little bit, but just to tell you about a couple upcoming webinars. So the next digital transformation series webinar is later this month. Incident response and disaster recovery panel discussion. So if you are at all involved in the cybersecurity posture of your business, this would be a terrific session for you to attend. I love the panel discussion format. You know, it's a little less formal, so it's going to be a really good session for sure. And then our next learning series, Jolynn, will be back here December 11th. And optimizing workflow, navigating OneDrive, SharePoint, and Teams. So kind of like tying it all together, which is always good to sort of connect the dots. So yeah, looking forward to that one for sure. And then the last point, and we'll just sort of reiterate this again, you know, SharePoint is, you know, I'll say a little help goes a long way, especially at the outset. And especially if you haven't really had much experience building a SharePoint site, there's way more ways to sort of step in the trap and not get it quite right than there is to get it right. So it is often a good idea to engage with somebody to at least get you pointed in the right direction, be a resource to call on if you have issues. Not that you can't do some of this stuff yourself if you've got that, you know, time and aptitude, but getting you pointed in the right direction can often be helpful. So if you know your CSM, your client success manager, reach out to them. If you don't, you know, this events at sourcepass.com will come to us, and we'll make sure that request gets routed the right way. And yeah, we look forward to helping you guys get going with productive SharePoint sites. And thanks for being here. As always, another great crowd. So I love to see the interest, and always good to have the Sourcepass community here. So until next time, we'll see you. Bye.